We have the September 19th Planning Commission meeting to order. First item on the agenda is to adopt the agenda. I believe everybody has a copy. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Okay, please.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Next item is we have two sets of minutes, one for the July 11th work session, and one for the August 15th. Why don't we take them one at a time? Anybody have any feedback or comments, concerns about the minutes from our July 11th meeting? I know some of you were not here.
I was here for the July 11th, not the August. The July 11th, I believe that there's 3 references to the spa, and I believe we moved to hold that back, not recommend that in the others.
I had a question about that also. I was confused.
In my notes, we said we were going to hold that, and there's 3 different references, and I can share this if the majority agree that we said we were going to hold that one back.
I think the issue was I think we originally said it was not connected to the others, but then I think we sort of struggled with the exact definition, now that I'm thinking back on it, and we thought it would be a good one to get in this first round, but it's not quite, it's the definition itself that seemed. Was that your consistent with your recollection? Okay, so that's the reference up to 170-8. Page 3, and maybe there's...
It's on page 1 and 2.
So it's the 170-8, oh, you mean page 1 2 of the...
Yeah, it's a 170-8 and 170-136.
Yeah. Okay, so let's...
I would move approval with that amendment.
So, perhaps to say, why don't we modify it to say, okay to move forward, but the definition itself needs to be revisited, because it's not, as I recall, we were putting things in, are they part of
If it
this
still
first
needed
round?
work, or if we wanted to move it forward, is kind of how
Yeah, okay. Well, it's the, maybe I'm trying to cut it too close. I would still like to get that one in, and it seems like we're close enough that we could get that in a first one. But we didn't stick to the idea of getting the first set out immediately anyway, so let's just say needs work.
So I'll second that with those changes.
May I make a suggestion?
Please.
Just on the front page, just a couple of just spelling or minor issues. In the first paragraph, second sentence, you also know that none of the current members were present at the meeting, were or not were, but were on the commission. 2 more, Mr. Light stated that when the commission went through each one and voted on them individually, and the commission...
Missing the word them.
Then I think.
Yeah.
Or on each individually, however you might put it, on each. And the commission recommended to make amendments to a markup of the ordinance for a public hearing. That's all.
Thank you. Do you have those? I guess, should we have a move and a motion and a second on that additional set? Do you amend your...
So move to include those.
You're still good with that? Thank you. I think we have a motion that's been duly moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The second set of minutes is for our August 15th regular meeting. I believe you all have, there was a copy of those on board docs. Any feedback on those? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve them.
A motion to approve.
And I'll second that. minutes since I did take a look at them and I thought they looked solid. Any further discussion? All in favor of approving them as posted, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I have to abstain since I wasn't here.
I'll do the same.
I'll do the same.
So that was,
Thank you very much. This time, prepare to open the public comment period for anyone who'd like to speak on any general topic. We have no public hearing scheduled for this evening. We will be discussing whether to schedule a public hearing on the Windsor Lodge stable as per the process that we now have interpreted in our ordinance. So if this will be the only opportunity for any comments on anything before us tonight or anything that you feel like commenting on. So, and again, I would ask if you have something to say, you identify your name and district you're from, and please try to limit your comments to 3 minutes. And with that, I will open the public comment period if there's anyone who would like to speak. All right. We will then close the public comment period and move on to new business. The first item of new business is the aforementioned special exception 180901 Windsor Lodge Stables. And I think the main issue before us tonight is the event portion. Ms. Summers, would you mind teeing that up?
Windsor Lodge had a special exception permit for a conference center. Here we go. Last year, they received approval with a step one, as one of the conditions that they reapply for a new permit in 1 year, and they have done so. They have proposed some amendments to the conditions that were in the previous permit, and at this time, the Planning Commission can decide whether they feel it's appropriate to go ahead and schedule that public hearing, or go ahead and make the recommendation to the Board of Supervisors.
The applicant is here. I believe I heard earlier that there have not actually been any events subject to the conditions of this proposal. So I think that's an important matter for record. Ms. Mead, I believe this applicant is from your district?
Yes, she is. And I was the one, I did hear from a neighbor that there had not been any events. Therefore, there aren't any complaints. Because it received so much attention the first time, if we were going to entertain the 5 years, I would be interested in holding a public hearing. If we were just to do it for another year, I wouldn't seem necessary to hold a public hearing, but that's my position.
Okay. Would anyone else like to comment on this? Rather than just go around, I'll just see if show of hands or wink or something if you'd like to comment.
I wasn't quite clear on the emergency access, how that was resolved. Question I presume it was, but I just don't.
So let's see, is that a question for you? Or do you have a question for the applicant, or what is?
But as I remember, there was an access going to be coming from about 522.
They can just come in from the front. I mean, they could go into the back, because we've had people do that when there was an accident, a riding accident. They did come through there.
Okay.
But they can come through the front also. And they said there's plenty of room for people to pass and for them to get through.
Okay.
Little Washington came there, Jericho Road, they said is great.
Any other comments or questions from the commissioners before we turn back to Ms. Mead to see if she'd like to make a motion? But maybe there's an opportunity, Mr. Henry.
The applicant's requested 5 years now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the two changes, as I understand them, were to go from 1 to 5 years, and the other is to limit the circumstances under which emergency personnel need to be notified to instead of for any event, to those events of 50 or more participants. Those are the only two changes. Is that?
And the full calendar.
Oh, sorry, and the calendar,
calendar.
the calendar being
Right.
full year round rather than those months.
And the event still stayed 4.
Yes,
I
it's
mean,
the same
it's
number,
pretty
just
much
spread
the same
over
number.
the full year rather than the spring to fall. Presumably would be the most likely time to have events anyway.
But the issue is, it's with the weddings with scheduling. Nobody is gonna schedule, they want to schedule out, so that's the issue. Then every year I come back, you never know, and how do you do that?
I'm seeing no other, Mr. Bird, are you picking up? Ms. Mead, we'll come back to you. Would you like to,
Yeah, I move with this request of the 5 years that we move to hold public hearing. Yes.
is there a second for that? Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So we will post the announcement, and that will be a public hearing at our next regularly scheduled
And
meeting.
then at the October meeting.
The October.
So you all will be notified, us or by mail, and so will the adjacent property owners.
And I do want to mention, this is only 4 days out of the year, of somebody's year. That's it. I'm not asking a whole lot. I just want to mention that again, it's 4 days, you know, so.
You'll be sure to want to mention that at the actual public.
Right, right.
That's all you're not.
Well, they know.
That's okay.
Okay, so next item on the business, on the agenda is the resolution from the Board of Supervisors asking us to schedule a hearing, I believe, on the minimum acreage for tourist homes. Is there someone prepared to, could you give us a...
Chairman,
Yes.
this actually is my initiative on the board, and it's specifically from a request by the Commissioner of Revenue to clear it up. And it is true that in 2010, the Board of Supervisors voted unanimously to change the acreage to 2 and 5 for agriculture and conservation respectively. And there was never any appeal to that, so it should stand in and of itself. However, it did come to surface that there was some issue about the advertisement of the actual meeting when we voted on that. So I think that, so we pretty much should do it over again and make it official. And if it turns out that it doesn't fly that way, and I mean, however it turns out, at least we'll know what we're dealing with. So I would like that to go to public hearing so that we can clear it up.
And specifically, it looks like the proposal is to set it at the 2 and 5 acres.
Right.
in the
I
agricultural.
personally think that's a good idea, and obviously every other board member did at the time.
That's what's in the resolution.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's what I would like to request, the 2 and 5 respectively. I just think it's gives more people an opportunity to use their homes that way, and it also helps tourism, I believe.
So, and I think our job here tonight is to respond to the resolution that specifically requests that we hold this hearing. I'm not sure there's much more to discuss on the matter tonight other than to agree or disagree whether we should schedule such a hearing. But does anyone have anything else to add to this?
Yes, the Board of Supervisors failed to take in consideration that, I guess they ignored that we have looked at this ordinance too, this changes, and I think we had 10 acres floating around in there. I think we approved that back when it was a different planning commission, and it never got up to the board, like some other things did. And so we had talked about this before, and felt that 10 acres was the appropriate size, I believe, for both ag and conservation, and recognizing that ag land is ag land and the countryside is countryside, and that people live in the countryside for additional privacy and open space, and that whereas the B&Bs, Airbnbs and things like this may be a appropriate in villages and towns on small sites, that there should be a greater consideration of site sizes in the countryside. So I guess the board ignored the work in our comments and decided to go back to this 2010.
Well, to be clear, all they've done is asked us to go have a hearing on it. So I think when we have a hearing on this, it will undoubtedly be, the discussion will obviously be limited to not be limited to this particular proposal. But once the hearing is on, you have a hearing.
There are also situations, because there is no, I think they call it, what do you call it when somebody has, somebody could have a 3-acre house lot, but they could own the surrounding 100 acres.
Contiguous.
What do you call it?
Contiguous.
Yeah, contiguous, but I'm talking about, there's a word like, it's not redaction, but it's,
Amalgamation.
it's not amalgamation, there's another word, do you know what it is?
Aggregation?
No, it starts with or anyway, there's a word for it. And so, at the very least, that should be incorporated in this, because there are large landowners that have many small parcels that are contiguous, and
I think that would be fine, Chris, if you had 1 acre and you own, 500 acres around it, I would have no problem with that.
right. So that's something that probably should be sorted out in this, no matter what acreage size we end up with, which, obviously I personally don't care, I'm just following through on a request from the
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Revenue.
Yes.
If I may. So with this resolution, you're compelled to hold this public hearing. However, you could expand it to include other permutations of the code as long as this is included in it. And the recommendation is forwarded up. You have, I believe, 100 days by code to hold this public hearing and forward on your recommendation to the board, or the board will just move without you. But that doesn't mean you couldn't advertise a public hearing that says 2 and 5 acres, 10 acres, 2 and 5 acres if there's contiguous or whatever. You can dream up some other options to advertise and have public hearing at the same time and still satisfy the board's directive.
Well, that sounds like,
Is this the time to do that, or we could just
I think we'll
include that language in this resolution?
It doesn't have to be in this resolution, it would have to be in what you direct the zoning administrator to advertise. And so it may take you a meeting to figure that out if you can't figure it out on the fly. But I would think the next meeting might be,
So Gary, if we have an application, you can go less restrictive, but you can't go more restrictive by an application. In this particular case, it would be more restrictive if you went to 10 acres. Is that following that same?
not really, because one of the issues with the advertisement for this original one is that you don't know the perspective of people out there that may come to a public hearing. They may want to support a small size or big size. And so if you say that the public hearing is going to be on 2 and 5 acres, and they think that's all that's going to be considered, well, they may or may not come out. But if there's people who think really strongly there should be a lot more, you're affecting who comes to the public hearing by what is advertised. So you really need to have a descriptive summary of what it is going to be. It doesn't have to be the exact language, but if it is the exact language, then you're definitely not going to have a problem with a flawed ad.
Could we advertise it as the acreage requirements for short-term rentals? That would leave you open to...
I believe you have to be responsive to the resolution from the board, but I think you could add on to that that it could be that you may consider any acreage, as long as it encompasses what the board asked you to do. I think the answer is yes.
So what, we could just add other acreage options to be discussed.
Considerations,
Other
options.
other acreage.
So this has to be advertised verbatim?
No, it has to be I forget the word, basically a reasonable description of what you're doing. so that the common person could understand what you're doing and if they should come and speak at the public hearing.
So we could simply state that the planning commission may consider acreage requirements greater than 2 and 5.
2 and 5 or greater or something like that.
2 and 5 or greater.
And can we go ahead and put in the thing about,
And whether
contiguous
ownership of the contiguous property should also be a consideration in the lot size requirement.
I guess that's something you can talk about that night, I guess.
But you couldn't act on it if you hadn't advertised it.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm sensing, I guess, do you feel like you have language that would do that? Do you want to try to read it back to us, or do people feel comfortable enough that we could act on that direction? I think it would.
If I were Michelle, I'd want a motion that tells me exactly what you want to advertise.
Make a motion that we move forward with advertisements for amendment of the ordinance for
Minimum acreage requirements?
just minimum acreage requirements of 2 and 5 acres or greater for the ag and conservation areas for, is it overnight? For tourist homes, good, tourist homes. And that's consideration of requirements of additional land ownership of the applicant or of the applicant of the owner, or whatever.
How about, and that the acreage requirement also consider ownership of contiguous properties by the applicant?
On the BZA, we're having trouble with the present ordinance because the definitions of tourist home, Airbnb, short-term rentals really aren't applicable for what is being applied for. And it would seem to me that this would be a very good time to deal with those definitions and make that part of the process. It's something that the sooner that it's proposed to the board and ascertained, the better it would be for the BZA, because we're in, at the moment, a tourist home is something that's rented for more than a week. That's what it says in the ordinance, and that isn't what we are being asked to approve.
So unless someone's ready to say what those definitions are tonight, I don't think we're prepared to hold that public hearing. I agree with you, as we get into our later business, we will be taking that on. I propose that we continue the path that we started to resolve those through work sessions, but I would have trouble, we're having a hard enough time figuring out the precise language to do notice on the acreage requirements. I don't think we're ready to hold a hearing on proposed new definitions. And until we're ready with those proposals, I don't know that we want to just have an open public hearing on this. That'd be my position.
So we table this for a work session, or what would we do?
We're not going to
So, first of all, the motion on the table is for this notice for the minimum acreage requirement. This is the requirement that we have before us to act on. So I would like to come to closure on this and address the other aspects of potential zoning ordinance amendments when we get to that part of the agenda, if I could ask that we take this on, because this one is in a special category now, given the action that the Board of Supervisors has taken. So I believe we were, you had asked me to restate what I said, and I believe that was, and that the acreage requirements for tourist homes consider whether the applicant owns the contiguous parcels or contiguous land. The contiguous parcel is probably reasonable. Does that get to the point? So not sure who's,
I'm gonna read what we just did.
Can we, I'd like to put a whole motion.
yeah, sure.
Yes.
You don't want to stay for this.
There goes half our audience.
The ad would be for amendments to the zoning ordinance for the minimum acreage of 2 and 5 acres or greater for the agricultural and conservation zoning districts for tourist homes and consideration whether the applicant owns contiguous parcels.
To meet the proposed ordinance change, or meet the proposed ordinance.
How about, required acreage can be met with multiple parcels when contiguous.
Multiple meaning more than one.
Yeah, could happen.
You could have 15.2 acre lots.
Yeah.
Chester Dam.
Chester Gap.
They're not acres.
Someone want to try that again? Yeah. We have
Amendments to ordinance for the minimum acreage of 2 and 5 acres or greater for the agricultural and conservation zoning district for tourist homes and consideration of,
I would say conservation districts, the required acreage can be met with multiple parcels when contiguous.
Could we do this in more than one sentence? I think that's probably wrong.
You can exchange semicolons with periods like.
First issue is, we're gonna consider the minimum acreage requirement for tourist homes in agriculture and conservation zones, including the 2 and 5 acres respectively or greater. The commission will also hear views on whether ownership of contiguous parcels should be a consideration in the application.
I think it has to be linked to whether multiple parcels meet the acreage requirement, the minimum acreage requirement.
I think she had it right the first time, if you just break it into 2 sentences. I don't think we're getting sentences.
This consideration isn't needed for bed and breakfast?
This is bed and breakfast.
The same.
170-66K4, which does that apply to?
I'm thinking when we're finished with all this definition, we're gonna, bed and breakfast and a tourist home are gonna be the same entity.
I think they might be wrong. We're talking about.
I don't think that's where we're ending. It does not have any say in it.
These are additional standards for tourist homes / bed and breakfast and boarding homes.
Okay, so I think the proper reference is to refer to 170-66K and use whatever language that applies to, because that's what's in the resolution.
I just read it.
So, I believe that was, I'm not even sure whose motion that was, Al's motion. Are you sufficiently comfortable with the motion that it represents your motion?
It represents my motion.
Okay. So is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor of proceeding with the notice and hearing as discussed, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. So now we go to old business, and so here we have few interrelated items. The first two of them address part of the broader question of some of the definitions around tourist homes and bed and breakfast. At our last meeting, we had agreed to schedule a work session. We finally got one scheduled, and it was on the day that we were supposed to get hit by a storm. That didn't materialize in the end, but given the required notice requirements, we had to make the decision before it was clear that it was not going to be a washout. So I would like to propose that we revisit the subject of having a work session on these various topics associated with these zoning amendments, as well as the comprehensive plan update, which we'll turn to in a minute. And I know I sent around an email today about possibility of doing that work session on September 28th. I didn't think to clear that with staff first. Turns out that day does not work for the zoning administrator. So I'm wondering if you all have able to comment on your availability for a work session on the afternoon of Wednesday, the 3rd of October. Tentatively saying 1 o'clock, but precise time to be determined.
At what time?
I'm proposing 1 o'clock on Wednesday, October 3rd, but I think that afternoon is really the key. We can refine the time, and I'm thinking 1 to 5. I would prefer to do this with, if people have some sense of whether they can make it or not. I hate to keep people blindly, but
I don't know.
you want to look for
I don't know first thing in the morning or this evening.
Why don't we just, does anybody know of any reason why that date won't work?
I'm going to be out of town, but don't wait for me.
Is there an earlier, I think we've concluded. Yeah, I think, so Wednesday, yeah, I don't think there's a day that would work around Wednesday. So we're definitely going into that following week. There's no way we could get this into next week. Okay. Any other problems? There are known problems with October 3rd? All right, well, again, I don't think it requires any action tonight other than to please confirm. Maybe Michelle, you can follow up and just take the poll to make sure that we would have good representation at that time. And again, I'm going to turn to Ms. Summers here in a moment, but I'll repeat what we said before. We've got several items here that are in various stages of development. The precise coverage of that agenda, I think, will depend on what we have available to us at that time. I know we're looking at signage requirements, the amendments that we said needed work from the ongoing list of amendments that we've been working on, and I think there were some other items in there that I'm not proposing that we get into tonight, but I think we do need to have a work session to get into them. Anybody have any other comments on those first two items of old business other than to confirm that we have a work session?
Just if we could be sure we could identify which ones we'll be talking about with the notice, so we can come prepared for that.
We'll try to tee that up better in advance of that meeting. Yes, sir.
Just, I don't know if commissioners are aware, the board did talk about the sign mural discussion at their last meeting. We reviewed some photos of different painted walls and what how we would want to interpret them. Would we want to regulate them or not regulate them? And the board asked Michelle, myself, and Art Goff to bring forward a few options for regulatory language for the next meeting, which will be the 1st, October 1st. So we'll be able to share some options with them on the 1st, and then if you have a work session a couple days later, you'll have the benefit of whatever discussions the board had on some alternatives. You might be able to polish one or more of those alternatives to get it ready for a subsequent public hearing.
Presumably, they won't just take one and pass it.
Not based on our progress to date.
Yeah, so.
Staff's progress to date, not the board's.
So, sounds like that will be a candidate, and again, I think that will be one where we really won't know exactly what we have before us until that Monday. I think that's what I'm start talking about. I mean, I think we're going to have to retain a little bit of flexibility. I'm sure we'll have enough to cover. Any other comments or questions about? Thank you, Mr. Curry. Any other comments on that? If not, Ms. Summers, would you please give us an update on the revisions to the comprehensive plan next?
They are just about complete, and we will have a copy for that work session.
Okay, so we'll certainly want to go through that. As I said before our last meeting, I know that a few of you who have not been on the commission that the last time we discussed this have been talking about some ideas for things you'd like to see in it. There's been some discussion about some of the items in section 6, including solar and that sort of thing. So while I'm anxious to move forward, I think based on our previous discussions, I would like to give everybody an opportunity if they have, I don't want to open it up. We'll try to keep it focused, but if you come with other things that you feel as commissioners are needed, we want to forego that opportunity for those of you who are having first chance at this. So I'll keep that policy open until there's a reason not to, and I would imagine that would be part of that discussion on the 3rd as well. Any other comments or questions about that, the comprehensive plan?
All right, so when is this likely, timeline, when is the comprehensive plan likely to get to the board of supervisors? Is this ready to?
Well, if we focus on it at the 10-3 work session, let's just work through that optimistically and say we come out of that session with no further changes. What is the path from there? We make it available and have a hearing on it, or do we go to this? Does it go first to the supervisors?
I think you have a public hearing.
You need to have a public hearing. So the question is whether you have enough time to advertise between the 3rd and your regularly scheduled meeting to meet the notice requirements in the paper. And Michelle can get the answer to that.
So you could actually presume you're going to get it all worked out and
Could
advertise for a public hearing.
Michelle's saying
It
no.
would have to be November.
It would have to be November.
Those are deadlines.
Okay.
It's 7 days.
It's 2 weeks in a row. The second, no closer than 5, and then more than 21 days away.
So my question is it necessary, or is it presumptuous to assume that everything would be worked out at the work session so that you could go ahead and advertise? Or is that too risky?
It's risky.
You could go with the planning commission in November, thinking a board in December.
So there wouldn't be, so there'd be a public hearing for the planning commission, but not for the board?
You both need to have a public hearing, and
So
it probably should be distinct. You could do it together, but for this, I think it'd be best, because you're going to get some feedback.
In November, I'd love to get this done by the end of the year, so in November, we would have the public hearing and the vote at the planning commission, and then in December, have the public hearing and the vote.
You will have had to advertise for both of those
Right.
before the planning commission, because not enough time between 2 meetings. So you'd have to go in knowing that the planning commission is going to have a public hearing at their meeting in November, the board is going to have a public hearing at their meeting in December.
So if we did that, we could still have it voted on by the end of the year?
Yeah.
Okay.
or delay it, or, you know, you'd have options at that point. If there were big changes that the citizens thought needed to be incorporated, well, then you could pause, incorporate changes, and then vote on it later. If the public came out and said, great job,
If we had the October 3rd meeting and did feel we're quite ready and we had another work session, is there a limit in when the actual final document has to be available ahead of time, or could we?
it has to be available when it's
When we
advertised.
notice.
So at that public hearing, it's going to, the ad is going to say the document's available for inspection. It should be online in this case, rather than force people to go to Michelle's office.
So then we really can't advertise it before that meeting, which means we can't
It
advertise
seems
it before
imprudent.
November.
Yeah, I think November is your best bet.
Yeah.
And you want it as right as you can get before the planning commission, and there shouldn't be many changes between the planning commission and the board. It should be pretty well ironed out.
Okay,
Does the
so,
final document have to be advertised? In other words, if our public input, the public hearing, we got changes that we put in, then we send it to the board, and then they advertise it, and they do some changes. Does it then have to be advertised again? Just one time?
so if we're talking about having the hearing at our November meeting, when is then the deadline for our being ready to advertise?
The end of October.
End of October, so we would still have an opportunity for another work session
Yes.
beyond the 3rd.
If we needed it.
You will need it.
All right, well, that sounds like a game plan.
You could continue your October 3rd work session.
Make sure someone stops me from calling adjourning it.
Well, if you do that, then just notice it. But
Everybody clear on that plan? Okay, I'm seeing nods. Good.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll get back to Michelle quickly about whether the 3rd works. Go from there. And otherwise, our next formal meeting is scheduled for October 17th, and with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? You can hang around and talk to yourself.